So, welcome to the webinar, everyone. My name is Ashley Ring. I'm a project manager here at OWL, and I make sure that we hear your feedback and then action it, helping our development team prioritize new initiatives and features. So, thank you again for taking the time to attend today's tutorial. We're thrilled to have launched secure messaging, and we're excited to teach everyone how to use it at their practices. It's a very exciting session because secure messaging is a revolutionary new feature and it's exclusively offered by OWL Practice. There aren't any other practice management tools on the market today that are offering this functionality. So it's very, very interesting and unique, and we're excited to show it off. Today, we're going to review secure messaging together, and we'll wrap up the session with a brief question and answer period at the end. The session will be approximately 30 minutes long, and we are recording today's session as well, so we can send everyone a copy afterwards. You will be muted for the duration of today's webinar, as I've mentioned, but there is a chat feature in GoToMeeting where several customer advocates are available to answer any of your questions as we go along. If you can't stay for the question and answer portion at the end, please feel free to email us anytime at support@owlpractice to follow up with any questions you may have. Our team is always happy to help. So our agenda for today, we'll be talking about what secure messaging is as a feature. We'll go through configuring your account and navigating the messaging area, and we'll talk about the different ways that you can message. So messaging internally and messaging with your clients. We'll also talk about client access and the notification system that are connected to secure messaging. And then at the end, as I've mentioned, we'll have a brief question and answer period where we can discuss anything that's come up throughout the session that's on your mind. So let's dive in then. What is secure messaging? Secure messaging is a tool which provides clinics with a secure, FI-compliant method of two-way communication within OWL. It can be used to have chat-style communication with your clients or internally to have chat-style communication with colleagues and staff members. Secure messaging is not intended to be a total email replacement. Clinics and clients can continue to use their existing email services and send communications to one another, but OWL Practice is simply providing an additional, more secure means of communication. And as I've mentioned, secure messaging can be used internally or with your clients. So if you're wanting to use messaging with your clients, you'll need to have the upgrade to OWL's client portal. To message internally with your staff, that'll be standard offering of this feature to any accounts that have multiple users logged into your OWL Practice instance. So like I mentioned, if you do want to use this with clients, you have to have our client portal upgrade. The client portal is a set of features designed to interact with clients, which includes your secure messaging, online booking, and intake and consent forms. Most of you are already familiar with online booking and intake and consent forms, but for those of you who haven't used it before, please feel free to reach out to our support team so that you can learn more and upgrade your account if you'd like. All right, so let's talk about what you can do with secure messaging. What are some examples of how it might benefit your practice? You can use it to schedule staff meetings and communicate internal policies. You can use it for admin notifications. You can talk about how clients have arrived within the clinic, notifying your therapists. You can discuss availability changes, talk about rescheduling your sessions. You can use it to communicate about ongoing homework or day-to-day observations with your clients. And really, any type of internal or client-facing communication that you need to have, secure messaging can help facilitate that. The important thing to know is that only users with a therapist profile can send secure messages to their clients. Your office admin users cannot participate in secure messaging conversation with clients, but they can participate in conversations internally with other staff members or colleagues at that practice. Secure messaging does not currently include the capacity to send or receive documents to clients. That's another important feature. We are planning on building this functionality in future, but for right now, there's no attachment capability. But this has been a popular request, and it's definitely going to be a next step extension of the secure messaging functionality. So when you want to use secure messaging, you'll want to just make sure that it's configured properly first as well. So by default, your secure messaging is going to be enabled. You can disable it if you'd like, if it's not a feature you'd like to use, but it's on by default so that you can explore it now that it's live. And you'll also just want to make sure that you configure your client-facing communication policy as well. I'm going to just switch into a live demo of my account now so you can see what I mean. So for those settings, to enable your secure messaging, as I mentioned, if you go into the settings area here, you'll see a new section called secure messaging. And if you go in there, you'll see whether or not your secure messaging is enabled or disabled. So if you want to change that, you can do that anytime. Then you also have this informative banner section here at the top. What this does here is allows you to display a banner of text in your online portal to the client so they understand the policies related to your messaging feature. So it'll display a section of text at the top of the page with the brief description of the feature that advises response times from the clinic are not guaranteed. And that's just our default message here for you, but you can change this and customize this as needed. And I'll just show you here on the client portal, you'll see when the client is online, they'll see that banner here. So that text is always available to them when they're at the online portal to see. So it's important here that you make sure you clearly outline your practice's policies around secure messaging. We're aware that this is a new feature and a new way to communicate with your clients. So you'll have some, process and procedure you'll want to outline there just so everyone is adjusted accurately to how you're going to be using messaging at the practice. If you want to edit the text that appears here, you can just type in whatever you need. You have a lengthy character limitation, so there's room to write out whatever it is that you need as part of that banner. But it is important to make sure that you keep the messaging generic because it will be visible to all of your online portal users. Wonderful. So now that we've given you a brief glimpse into setup and configuration, let's talk about navigating secure messaging. So you may have noticed, as of yesterday, there's this new section in your account called messaging, if secure messaging is enabled, of course. And when you come in here, you'll see the message center. All of the conversations listed that you've started or have begun having will be listed down the side here in descending order from most recent to least. We'll take a tour through this area to show you all of the little nuances and how to best navigate it. When you do enter the message center, obviously you'll see those conversations right away, and each conversation is shown with its own conversation summary. So you'll see here, all of the conversations that you're part of as a user will appear in the sidebar, and you'll only be able to see the conversations that you are participating in. If the color of the conversation here is green, you'll see that that's a client conversation, or clients are participating in that conversation. If the color of the conversation is this deeper dark blue color, it means it's a conversation between OWL users only. And when you click on the conversation icon, it'll show you those participants. So you can see the people who are involved in that conversation when you hover over the icon. Next, you'll notice at the top here this new conversation button. Clicking this does prompt you to choose a chat type and start a conversation. So depending on your user role and permissions, you'll be able to start a conversation with a client or other members at the practice. So you'll see here I have the chat type client or office. All of the conversations that are listed here will display with a participant or a group name. So you'll notice how some of my messages say all office. That's a chat that's got a lot of different people in it from my office. And you'll see this one here says Jessica Hartford. That's a client. Or I've got Jenny listed here as an admin. That's just a conversation between the two of us. You'll see the conversation is always listed with either that group name or that participant, depending on the type of conversation that it is. Group chats are assigned a group name by the person who originally initiates the conversation. You'll notice too that there's also a subject line underneath, so you'll see all office, general messages here. When you start a conversation, you're always prompted to assign a subject line to it. And that subject line is assigned to the conversation for reference, but it'll appear at the top of your chats as you're having them too. So when you're in a conversation and you're actively chatting with people, that subject line is always a refresher of which chat that you're in and what that conversation is about. Any conversations that have unread messages will display the number of unread messages. So you'll see here each of these chats, I've got numbers next to them for messages that I haven't seen. If I click into that message and view it, it'll show me that it's been read and take that indicator away. So you'll always know which of your conversations have new updated threads that you haven't seen yet and that you need to view. You'll also notice that when you're in a conversation window, there's at the bottom here, this view participants, or it might say edit conversation. So if I were to go into a conversation with all office, you'll see I can edit conversation, but if I'm in a client chat, it says view participants. So if it's a conversation with you and a client, it'll always appear as view participant because you can't add any additional people to this conversation now that it's happening. But if it is a group conversation, you'll see here I can edit conversation and I can still add additional users to this conversation if I'd like to. You'll also notice when you're in chat here, the text typing field, very straightforward. This is where you'll type all of your messages. So you can just type into this field to get started. I'll point out too that when you're typing a message, let's say you're here having a conversation with someone and then you move into another conversation. If you've started something, one of those conversations here will show you a little pencil icon to let you know that you've started drafting something that hasn't been sent yet. So you can come back to it and you'll see that message here will persist. So you'll notice that pencil icon on any messages that you've maybe started typing something for but haven't come back to yet. And you can send your messages in this text field by hitting the little icon here on the side to send your message, or you can actually just hit enter on your keyboard as you're typing, which I'm sure is the most common thing we're going to see. It's easy to just type your message, hit enter, and then it's sent. You'll also notice at the top of the page here the new message alert. So just like the unread notification, this here persists anywhere throughout the OWL application. So you'll see these notifiers on the conversations individually, but if I were over in the dashboard and I was looking at stats or some revenue and new messages came in, this indicator here draws my eye to this area. So I know there's new incoming messages and communications for me. So it's just a way that it will persist throughout the app to keep you aware of any conversations that are happening ongoing. When I come back in here, I can see those two messages. One thing I'll point out too is this close conversation button. What this is going to do is if you're focused on one particular conversation and you don't want to see the sidebar here, you can click close to slide this conversation into your full focus so that it's the only thing you're viewing. And you can open that conversation panel too to see the conversations. It just depends on how you like to work, but you have that option if you'd like to go full screen and squeeze out the conversations down the side. Finally, the last thing I'll show you is a button up at the top here that's called Start Archiving. So clicking this button will open up the ability to archive your messages. OWL will retain all of the conversations you participate in, but you can use the archive to keep your conversations organized. So if this list of ongoing conversations is getting too long to manage, or some of the conversations have been completed, maybe they've just reached their natural conclusion, you can archive them. When you click this button, it'll turn all of the different conversation icons orange, and it means that they're in archive mode. You can then click on each conversation to move it to your archive. So if there's an older message here, I can just click on it and you'll see it moves it down into the archive there. When you're done, at the top here, you'll just click the button that says Done Archiving, and you'll see here those conversations no longer appear in my listing. So it just helps me keep my visibility neat and organized for conversations that are active and still happening. But you'll always be able to view those old conversations as well by going into your archive at any time. And they're still active conversations. You can unarchive them if you'd like to as well to return it to the main view if you ever need to. Wonderful. So that takes us through our overview just of what's happening here in the message center and some of the little nuances of usability. So now that you're a little more familiar with what secure messaging is, you can start setting up different group conversations and chats with your team internally if you'd like. So group users can use secure messaging, and solo users can use it as well to communicate with any administrative staff. With your group practice, obviously there's a lot more users, and with the solo, you may have one office admin or a supervisor who has access to your account, and that makes it a nice feature to use in those cases if you're not in the same room, but you want to have some back and forth about ongoing tasks. If you want to start a conversation, all you have to do is click on that new conversation button, as I mentioned, and then you'll see if you do have our client portal add-on, you'll have those two different chat types. So you can do client for client conversations, or you can do office for conversations with other users at the practice. If you want to start a conversation with one of your colleagues or someone else on staff, just open that button and then choose the chat type office. You'll see here you can type in the name of the person that you want to chat with, and it will start bringing them up in the search results, or you can actually open this drop-down list to scroll through a list of all those users and select the person from that list. So you'll see it's pretty easy to start that conversation with the person that you need. You can choose multiple people, so I can add as many people as I'd like to that conversation. Very easy to do that. If I've added someone I don't want to, I can just unclick before I start that conversation, close them out. Very, very easy to do. We've also pre-populated a few different conversation options by user type. So you'll see here, to make it quick and easy to start some conversations, we've got all office to message every user with access to that instance, all office admins, all owners, and all therapists as well. So you can quickly start a conversation with all of the therapists at your practice if you'd like. And it's pretty straightforward to do that. You'll see, as I mentioned too, when you start that conversation, you'll have to assign a group name. So I might say, this is my therapist group if I want to. And then I've also got to assign a subject line. So maybe this is like weekly meeting or whatever it is the conversation will be about. I can create that group and start having those conversations. Then when I'm ready, I would just click the create button and it will start the conversation. And you'll see here, it's now a blank conversation, and I can type into this field and send a message to everyone in my group. You'll notice that when I do message, like I said, we have this edit conversation button. Group chats are a little more flexible, so I can go ahead and add people to it. If someone was missing, I could choose them from that list and add them. You'll see anyone who's highlighted in white here has been already added to the conversation, but anyone who's not, I can click on their name to add them to the conversation. And for reference, it's really important to know when you're adding people to a conversation, they will see the entire back scroll of your conversation, even for messages that they haven't been present for. So they'll see a full and complete message. Oh, and you'll notice right now we've just gotten an instant response. So you'll see I sent my message and it had a little gray check mark next to it. And then when it was red, it turned green. So you'll see here, I'll send a message again. You'll notice that that check mark is gray. And then as soon as it's red, it turns green. This gives you really instantaneous messaging. And then you'll see you can have this sort of back and forth. You'll also notice that when you're in the message, you can see date and time stamps for when those messages were sent. And you can easily hover over it there to see when the message was sent. And you'll also see the date and time at the top of that conversation as well. As I mentioned, you'll see the date and timestamp on the message, but when you hover over it, you'll also see this menu with these 3 vertical dots here. So this will give you a couple of different options. You can copy the contents of that message, and if your message hasn't yet been read, so you'll see here the gray arrow on this one, I'll also have the option to delete it. So if you send a message to someone and you realize, oh, I didn't mean to send that, you'll have a window of being able to delete that message before it's viewed. And unread, for these purposes means as long as no users have viewed that message. If at least one user in your conversation has viewed it, it can no longer be deleted. So you'll see these messages that have been viewed don't have that option. They just give me the copy option. That takes us through the staff conversation, and it's pretty straightforward, like I mentioned, so easy to have these kinds of conversations with your staff and colleagues as needed. Client conversations are very similar. So what you would do is obviously click the new conversation button, but this time choose the type client. And you can search for your client by typing their name here, and you'll see when you do, it adds them to that conversation. And you'll see that they're highlighted in blue if they have an active online portal account that they're able to message from. If you try and add someone who is, let's say, turns out red, you'll see an alert that this user does not have a portal account, so they need to have an account created, or you maybe need to email them, send them the URL for online booking and get them signed up, and then you can have conversations with them. So you'll see we're just going to make sure we have here a client who's blue who will get our messages. And you'll also notice the option on the side here to add linked accounts or add OWL users. If I choose to add linked accounts, it'll pop open this dropdown and it'll show me any linked accounts who are connected to this client's account. So I can select those people and include them in the message as well. Again, same logic applies. If I choose someone who is red, they don't have a portal account, so they won't be able to be messaged. But if they appear blue, they do, so they'll be able to participate in that conversation. You'll also notice that I can't add other clients to the conversation. So you'll see if I try typing a different client, it's just going to replace the first one that I had selected, because you cannot have different clients involved in the same conversation. Only one client can message with the practice at a time with the addition of their linked accounts, because there's a certified connection between those users. So you'll see here, you'll want to just make sure that it's the one client and any linked accounts in that conversation. You'll also notice this Add OWL Users flag. Now this can be used to add other staff members at the practice to that conversation. So the same way that you can add linked accounts, you can add therapists and other users too. For instance, if I'm talking to a client and I need my supervisor to be present, or maybe I want to have another therapist who's worked with this client before involved, I can add them to the conversation as well. And again, I would just give it a group name and a subject line to assign to that conversation before I'd be able to start. If you only have one person in a conversation, there's no need for that group name because it's not a group chat, so it would just be a regular subject line. And then you'd click create and you would start the conversation. So you'll see here, you can just type in and start that conversation with the client. One notable difference I'll show you about chatting with your client is that you can actually create to-dos based on the responses that they send you. So if I were to go to one of my other client messages here, you'll see I sent Jessica a message and she responded to me. When I hover over her message or her response, you'll see that menu gives me this create to-do option. If I click that, it'll pre-populate a client to-do for her profile with a date and with what she said pre-populated. I can change this if I want to and say that I need to remind myself I need to write an assessment or something like that. And I can give it a to-do date or deadline, just like you're used to doing, and I can save that right away to that client's file. And it's created that to-do. So it's one of the great ways that we've actioned messaging to make sure that when you're having those conversations, if something important comes up and you want to remind yourself, I need to follow up or I need to do something, you can just easily create a to-do based on that message from a client. It's really, really helpful. You can also start conversations with your clients from within their client profile. So while the messaging center is the hub of all messaging, and this is where you'll see all of the conversations and where all of the activity will take place, we have made it easy to have conversation with clients from their profile as well. So if I go to clients and I go into Jessica's profile here, you'll notice now in the sidebar where it previously ended at the log section, we now have secure messaging. If I click into this section, I'll see my history of conversation with Jessica, and I'll see the ability to start a new conversation. So again, I can come in here, start my conversation. It's already pre-selected her for me. We can add some linked accounts from her file if they're eligible for chat, or we can add any other OWL users if needed and start that conversation. So you'll see you can message from within that client profile too, which is really, really helpful. And you can also archive conversations from within here too, if need be. This completes our review of how you can use secure messaging to chat internally with your colleagues as well with your clients. So that sort of shows you the ins and outs of everything here. And now we'll talk about how you can set your clients up to access secure messaging. So once your clients are set up with portal access, you may need to revoke their access. If, for instance, you have someone who has access to the portal who no longer needs it, you can revoke that access. So in the client's profile, if you come in here and you go to Contact and Clinical and Account Details, you'll see Online Portal Settings. So you know if someone has access to the portal, they have access here. And if you ever need to take away that login option, you can come down to the bottom of their window and revoke access if needed. You can assign new passwords here as well to your clients if they're not creating their own accounts. And you can also, if I've ever, revoked access and I decide that we need to reinstate it, you can do so from here too. So you can see we've taken away that access, but if I go to edit and come down to the bottom here, I can also reinstate that access as needed. So just so you're mindful, you have control over whether or not clients are able to access your online portal. They need to have access to the online portal to have conversations with you, secure messaging style. Like we've mentioned, if you try to start a conversation with someone who doesn't have access, they won't be able to have conversations with you. When you're looking at a past conversation with a user whose access has been revoked, so let's say we've taken away this access, right? So we're still revoked. And if I go into secure messaging and I look at that conversation, let me just double check. I think we revoked access. Let's just go back here and make sure. Oh, I reinstated it. Let me just revoke while we're still talking about this. Perfect. So you'll see if you've been messaging with someone and they've left the clinic and you've taken access away, you will still have that conversation history. And you'll notice that here, that you can't start chats with people who don't have access to the portal. And you'll see that too when you click into their message, that their access has been revoked. So you'll always know if a client is able to participate in messaging or not. And if I go to start a new conversation with someone I've revoked, they'll show up in gray here with an alert. So you'll be able to easily distinguish people in blue who are active and you can converse with, people in red who don't have portal access yet, and people who are in gray who do have a portal account but have had access revoked and need to have it reinstated if you want to message with them. So let's just give Jessica her access back here so that she can participate in secure messaging. I'm just going to save this and update. Perfect. So it's easy to assign your users access to the portal as needed. Some people using the portal just give the URL to their clients. They can come in, sign in, and create their account. And then once they've verified their account, they're able to message with you. I'll just show you while we're here. So we looked at the client portal briefly. So from the client's perspective, I can come in and I can see my messages from my therapist and I can read those messages. Oh, I might just need to refresh here for a second since we changed some of my access around. There we go. So you can see, I can come in, see my messages, and have conversations. When I'm a client and I go to start a new conversation with my therapist, all it prompts me for is a subject line because I'm automatically just messaging with my therapist. Clients don't have control over messaging anyone at your practice. They can't scroll through a list of users. They're just connected with their therapist automatically. So I can create my subject line here for my message and start my conversation as well. And you can see it's easy for me to type up a message and send it off as a client. I'll still be able to see the calendar, to book my appointments, look at the details of my account as needed, but I'll now have access to this messaging section here as a client that I can come into for those communications. Part of OWL's secure messaging feature also includes notification emails when new messages have been sent or received. And there are 4 types of notifications relating to secure messaging. The first one is messages have been received for a new conversation. So an email notification is delivered to the recipients of the message in that new conversation. So if I've started a conversation with my therapist gets an email that a new secure message is incoming. There's also just a standard new messages received. So OWL does send an email notification about new messages that have been received for an ongoing or already started conversation. What we've done is we've put some time bounding on those notifications so that you'll only get an email for new messages that have been received after an hour of user inactivity. Obviously, we don't want to send you an email every time someone's messaging you because as you're going, you're getting messages and now too many emails. So we've limited it so that the amount of emailing is minimal. The notification you'll also get would be participant added. That's the third type. So that's sent to any members of a group chat when a new participant has been added to their conversation. So if I'm part of a group that's been chatting and someone from the admin team is now added in, I get a notification to say, so-and-so has also been added to your conversation. And there's also an email that goes to that new participant as well when they're invited and added to a conversation. So they'll be notified that a conversation is ongoing and they now have access to it and they've become part of that group. The email notifications ensure that users are notified about new messages and conversations so they don't miss out on anything important. As much as we have, the alert here in app that draws your eye to things, those notifications are just an added layer of informing you that there are new messages incoming and that you don't miss anything that's important. So that takes us through the experience as a whole. That takes us through messaging with your staff, messaging with your clients, as well as a few other little nuances and things about this feature. Thanks again, everyone, for attending the webinar today. We will do a question and answer period now, so we can talk about, anything you've observed or anything that's on your mind about secure messaging. But I hope this gave you a really good overview of what this feature is and how it can be used to benefit your practice in future. So I'm just going to open up our chat section here and see if we have conversations happening. I'm sure our advocates have been busy answering questions all throughout. Let me just take a look here. Okay, Isabel had asked about working with couples. Is it possible to send one message? Oh, sorry. Let me just go back here. Is it possible to send one message to both members of the couple? Absolutely. Using that linked accounts feature, if those couples are combined in OWL that way, you can definitely message with both, and both can participate back and respond to your messages. It looks like Tila answered that question, which is great. Diane had also asked about an independent practitioner with a larger organization and wanting to chat. Oh, I see you have students and residents are part of that organization as well. As long as someone has access to the OWL account, you'll be able to message them. So only if they have a login to your OWL account can they be someone that you message with. So if anyone, independent practitioner or students, etc., if they don't have access to OWL, you won't be able to message with them. But if they do, then you can have chats with them and you can create all kinds of different groups to segment those conversations as needed. We have a question here from Almuth as well. Can this app differentiate between psychotherapy clients and supervisees who are not part of my practice but whom I supervise? Yeah, so to answer that question again, the app isn't going to differentiate between people in that way. Like you're not going to see a label saying what kind of services that person receives, but you'll be able to tell when you're talking to a client versus a supervisee. And again, that supervisee needs to be someone who has a login to your OWL instance for you to be able to message with them. If they don't have user access and can't log in, then they're not someone that you can use secure messaging with. Just scrolling through the questions here as well. Oh, Jennifer asks if we can print the conversations. Great question, Jennifer. At this point in time, no, we can't print out those conversations, but we know the conversation history is something that is important. So for future versions, we're looking at ways that we can have a conversation record either printable or exportable. Just looking through some of our questions as well. Wynn had asked, are you able to set up a client with online access just for messaging, but not for booking their own appointment? That's a great question. If they have access to the online portal, they'll definitely have access to booking. But what you can do is limit service availability. It might not be the best workflow, but if I had set my clinic up so that none of my services were available or bookable, the client would be able to see the calendar here and they would just see that nothing is available. So they wouldn't be able to book, but they would be able to message. And they might ask you about that, like I'm trying to use the calendar and nothing's available. And you could just tell them you're using this for messaging and not booking. And that might also be something important that you'd want to put in the banner, that although they have access to an online portal, the practice is not using online booking services at this time, but are using this engine for messaging. So it's up to you how you set that up and how you approach that. But it is definitely possible to set it up that way. Just looking here to see if we have any other questions as we go. Can a client message be forwarded on to admins? That's a great question. You can't forward the messages onwards. If you're not part of a conversation, you won't see those messages. If you're having a conversation that's a group type message that an admin isn't part of, you can invite them to that conversation and they'll be able to see all of the past history and discussion there, but they won't be able to, you can't forward those messages on. And once you start a client conversation as well, if I start my client conversation and I don't add other OWL users, you'll see here, client conversations are locked down once they're created so that you'll only have this view participants button and you can't add people to it. So you'll need to make sure you add that person to the conversation at that time. If you realize you'd like to add the admin in, you can just start a new conversation and make sure you include them in that client conversation. A question from Lori here. Is there an upgrade in the works to use cybertherapy video therapy? Great question. That is a very highly requested feature, and we do have our team planning to work on that as part of something we deliver this year. It's a much more comprehensive feature than secure messaging, obviously, because it involves that connection face-to-face with another person, but we know it's something that's really important and is coming up a lot in this space now to help connect people. So it's something we definitely want to do and are planning to do for sure. Question here, are the groups similar to channels in team messaging apps like Slack? Great question, Isabel. Absolutely. Any kind of group conversation that you're setting up here is like you're talking to people at your work, like you're using a chat application to have that kind of conversation. And with the group chats in the office, you can add people as needed. So you really can have this sense of setting up channels if you'd like. If you want to set up a group chat with all the admins called the admins chatter, or the therapist chatter, where it's just a place where all of those people talk throughout the day, you can absolutely do that. Diane had asked, clients receive notifications about incoming messages via email. Does the portal stay open throughout a single conversation? So they will get notifications via email, but really what you're doing here is this will stay open if it's open as a browser on my computer, but if I close out of here, my conversation, I'm not able to access it or go into it anymore, but I just open that browser again, log into my account to get to that conversation and continue participating. Cindy had asked, can I set up the online access from clients or for clients and set up their password, or is that something they have to do? That's entirely up to you, Cindy, for how you prefer to operate online booking. We do have some practices who will just say, here's the URL to my site, go ahead and create an account and you can get started messaging me. And we have other practices that prefer to manage that onboarding and say, I have an online portal, I'll give you a login, you can go to this URL and use this login to access it and start using it. It really is up to you and your preference for how you'd like to operate as a business, but you can do that for them. You can really invite everyone individually and create their own access to manage that onboarding, or you can just open it up and let whoever has that URL create an account and join. And Isabel had also asked, and generally, how is this similar to or different from Slack? Great question. So I would say the biggest difference is that, secure messaging is part of your OWL account now. So it's very much a part of your history and your practice's use with OWL. Slack is an independent third-party chat system, and you can use that however you'd like. By all means, you can use any kind of messaging systems that you like, but with the option of it being in OWL, we find that's really helpful for therapists because as you're in here every day in the calendar, scheduling, working, etc., you're not having to flip to a different app to see what messages you need. You're seeing them right here in real time. You're getting alerts about things that are incoming without ever having to leave OWL. The good thing too is that all of the messages and communications that happen here are securely stored on OWL servers, the same as all of your client data is now. With third-party services like Slack, you don't have as much control over security of those messages and what the access is to them. So it's a little bit different that way, and we're hoping people feel more empowered to use the OWL application because all of your data is stored securely and encrypted securely by OWL, the same way that it is with your client files when you're secure messaging. So it takes that use of another system over to OWL, which we find is really, really helpful for people and really compelling throughout the day as you're using OWL. I think I've captured all of the questions here in the back scroll, but if there's anything I've missed, please feel free to ping in here and let us know. One thing I'm going to show you that I'm going to point out that we haven't talked about yet as well, but this is another online portal upgrade. I'm just going to go and open up the online portal again. And actually, I'm going to, let me just go to my settings. So you'll see here in online portal, we have a new setting I'm going to point out as well. And this is a new related feature to secure messaging. But if I go into portal, you'll see I have this option to show a finances tab. So I can say, no, I want to hide it, or yes, I want to show it. I'm going to save that. And you'll see here that when I save that, what that means is that I'm giving my clients access to see their receipts. So I'm going to just copy our URL here and come back. And you'll notice now when I'm in the online portal, I have this finances tab. So you'll see here, if I click into finances, I can see all of my financial documents in terms of receipts and refunds if they've been sent to me. Now, this is something that, again, in the interest of sharing information with your clients and giving them, all of that information up front, helps you have this information here. So you don't have to email those receipts or send them if you have portal users who just say, getting my receipt online is fine. And when I come in here, I can click on my receipt and it'll automatically download it as a PDF to my computer, and I'll have access to that as a client. So I'll see that receipt and I can save it as needed. It's another one of the ways that we be a little bit more environmentally friendly and help phase out paper. So people have copies to this information if they need it, but they don't necessarily have to be handing off paper all the time. And this is something that we realize maybe not all practices want to share with their clients, but if you do, you can enable that setting and share the finances online with your clients now as well. Melissa asks, is there an option for a sound notification? That is such a great question, Melissa. It's something we talked about in early phase development of this feature, and it's not something that we've done for the very first iteration, but it is something that we're going to do in future version, so that when you're in OWL practice and you're getting new notifications and messages, you can very easily get that ping if you want to hear that a new message has come in. Because we know that that's something too. People have a visceral reaction to hearing a message ping come in and then wanting to respond to it. So it is coming, but great question. All right. Wynn asks, what happens if you're seeing a couple and they are linked? Then they separated and you continue with one of the partners as an individual. How do you unlink the account at that point and keep the new individual file separate from the linked account? So in that case, what you'd need to do, again, is just really manage that transition. So the conversations that they've had prior and that they've been part of, they'll always have access to as part of their messaging because they have user access, they have a message history, and they'll see that. So you would just start a conversation with that client going forward that doesn't include their partner. And if you need to, you can unlink their accounts so that they're not connected. So in my client file here, if I pull up Jessica's file, and let's just go into contact and clinical, and then into my circle of care, you'll see here all of my various relationships. If I need to remove one of those relationships, I can click here and I can either edit to change that relationship if I need to, or I can click delete and it'll let me know that I'm deleting the linkage here between those two accounts. So you can delete their connection and then they can't be messaged again going forward. And you would just message them as individuals. But again, they would always have access to any messages they've participated in together prior, because that's part of their history with you as a therapist and together as a couple at your practice. So you just separate that linkage and message them separately. You're very welcome, Wynn. I see another question here from Wing. Oh, you came late because your session ran over. Can I view this tutorial later? Absolutely. So we are recording this session today and we're going to send all of our registrants a copy of it for their reference. We've also created 2 great videos that walk you through navigating secure messaging and how to use it. And they've been posted to our YouTube channel. So anyone who's interested in watching those can go to OWL Practice on YouTube and watch those videos. We can also send you links if you email our support team and request them. They're very helpful tutorials that walk you through everything we did today. So don't worry if you feel like you've missed out. All right, I'm just going through the back scroll here to see if there are any other questions we've missed, and feel free to type any other questions. We have a couple more minutes on the line before we'll wrap up the session. So thank you to anyone who joined us today and enjoyed this session. If you do have questions, feel free to ask them, and if you don't, it's okay to hop off the line and get back to your very busy Friday. I see another question here from Wing. Like we use secure messaging, can we also use it to send consent forms? Great question. You can use messaging for chat communications at this point in time, but you can't use it to send any documents or attachments. That's something we'll be looking at in a future version of this feature as well. You should still use the intake and consent forms feature if you have documents you need to be completed by your clients. Wonderful. It looks like we've answered almost all of the questions here and people are starting to head back to their day. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Really appreciate it. As I mentioned, we will send a recorded version of this webinar out to all of our registrants afterwards, and we do have other resources online as well. If you need them or you have any questions, just email our team, support@owlpractice.ca.